Some call me the Oracle. Some call me Whitestar, Paquisal, Salal to Spokes. Tactically, Whitestar Eagle Visions. I earn these names traditionally. I'm a pipe carrier, a lodge keeper. I'm a prophecy teacher. Right now, as a species, we are going through this amazing revolution. And you're a part of it. You know, way back in 2012 when nothing happened, so much happened. But they forgot to tell you. They forgot to show you. I'm sure you recognize the whole world is in a real interesting place right now. And the prophecies are clear that the past is coming to an end, is being dismantled as gently as possible, but definitively being dismantled. And you, as a human, are becoming so much more than you used to be. New chakras, new frequencies, new energies, new awareness, new science. You want to keep up? Come hang out with me once a week. We're going to talk about some really interesting stuff. Weird is the new sexy, they tell me. So come on, let's get weird together. Attack wise. See you soon. There you go. Attack wise, indeed. This is one of my favorite tools, to be honest. Metaphysically speaking, for divination, access, amplification. What is so cool is a clear quartz of all the stones can be programmed, reprogrammed, etc., etc. You know, you literally just decide, I want this clear quartz crystal to be a healing stone. And when you grab it and pick it up with that intention, you literally imprint it, and wouldn't you know it, it's a healing stone. And you can put it down, walk away, come back to it a minute later and say, now I want it to douse for me. Pick it up, just like magic. You imprint it, program it, and you can douse with it. And you can continue doing that time after time after time after time, completely reusable, so multi-purpose. Whereas, you know, rose quartz, for example, rose quartz, the pinky hue to it, you know, still in the quartz family, but it's got this pinky hue to it. It has an agenda. It wants to heal your flesh. It wants to heal your physical body. It wants to heal your heart just a little bit, you know, in that space. So it actually comes to the table with a specific medicine attached to it. Right, you know, whereas again, clear quartz is that clear dynamic itself. You can still imprint that rose quartz with some juice and with some energy, but to be honest, you might find it frustrating or even a little more difficult to try and imprint it into a task that it's not designed or suited for. Right, you know, just like life, common sense stuff. Right, you know, use the right tool for the right job. Whereas again, that clear quartz is perpetual mimicry. It's the perfect parrot, if you like. It's so if you're going to have just one stone kicking around, that's the one I suggest that you get called to. Just have a really cool clear quartz and allow that to be such a powerful multi-purpose tool. Now this one is unique because it's actually not a clear quartz. It's a Lemurian seed crystal. I know I've talked about this a little bit in the past, but it was not so long ago that these were just considered, you know, fiction. The Lemurian seed crystals, you know, from the civilization of Lemuria, etc. And well, there's a guy running around Brazil who, you know, shovel and pick and, you know, looking for crystals because that's what he did generationally. You know, this guy apparently, you know, he couldn't read or write so good, but he knew crystals like a cattleman knows cows. Yeah, you know, and so, you know, he discovered these things. And what I mean by discovered is he discovered these crystals that were, you know, sitting in this bottom of this valley, you know, covered in sand-ish, you know, terrain. But he found this crystal just placed in there, not attached to a cluster in any way, shape, or form, which leads a little bit to the Lemurian seed crystal dynamic, because with the quartz crystal, with almost any crystal that's out there, you need to have a seed. It's like a plant, if you like. You plant it, and through, in layman terms, sound, water, vibration, etc., you know, it creates this by pooling the environment basically into this one space. Not so different than any other physical thing on the planet that grows naturally. But the Lemurian seed crystals were found completely intact, but placed and definitely in a protective manner in the sand, because it wasn't just one, there was many. And then they got that to the next layer, and there were still many, and then two, and there's layer after layer after layer after layer after layer. Now, they can tell you where a crystal is formed sometimes literally by putting it under a microscope and taking a look at the composition. Sometimes they can narrow it down to sometimes within certainly almost a mile, but almost within 10 feet of where a crystal is formed based upon its unique compositions of materials that it's made of. Simple as that. Well, these Lemurians, when this guy presented them, to the, governing body, if you like, to identify and so we could label them and sell them appropriately, came back with, where do you get this? Because, rumor has it, that these Lemurians the composition in them are not from here on the planet. There's stuff in here that's not from here. Very interesting. And they never did find the mother cluster. They haven't found it yet. Now, I've heard all sorts of rumors, that particular cluster, that dynamic that is there. Well, they say that's on another planet. Yeah, totally. Hey, Everett, how you doing, brother? How do man-made semi-precious stones or crystals play into crystal work, or do they? Oh, that's actually a really good question when it comes to scrying and these kind of dynamics. This one here is actually carved specifically into we had learned that these crystals that were harvested, some were showing up damaged, and so me and a friend of mine, Theodore Bromley, kind of arranged to have those crystals sent to a local factory where they were then carved into these spheres, and I even had a whole bunch of chains made up in sacred geometry. Now back to how does it play a role? In my opinion, as a professional scryer, and I've actually played with lots and lots and lots and lots of crystals, size matters. Yeah, don't kid yourself. Size matters in the universe. But to be honest, the size matters with crystals because while you're doing your scrying, you're going to be amplifying energy, and a bigger crystal can amplify more energy and the common sense dynamic of a bigger viewing screen. It's really tough I think I see something here versus, my big old 14-pound smoky quartz I know I'm seeing something, right? And so size matters in that dynamic. Now, I had an extraordinary run of success scrying with a tool that was actually lead crystal. Lead crystal is crushed crystal parts, basically, put into a mold and poured. And they pour some lead and a bunch of other stuff in it. Swarovskis do that all the time. That's kind of what most Swarovskis, to be honest, are, is this lead crystal, which has, and the cool thing with a Swarovski scenario is that they stand by their product and say it's high quantity of crystal can be found in their product. You can find them out there that are, even more plastic or, something else, glass even, what I'm saying, versus the actual quartz and crystal itself. So that's where the varying dynamic is. If you find, something that has been poured and created into a lead crystal or some other kind of form that has a high quality of that crushed quartz, that crushed crystal in it, to be honest, it's my opinion, it makes very little difference in the performance of it. You're still going to get crystal clear. You're still going to get lots of stuff. You're going to, and bottom line performance, right? So, although it's in many pieces, put into a form, it's still going to perform like a Porsche. It's still going to do what you want it to do. But if it's mostly plastic or lead and those part of those compositions basically is what you kind of have to know. So if you're in the market for purchasing a crystal ball, I would have to say this is about as small as I want to get. And the most comfortable for specifically beginners would be one about the size of a softball. And I don't have a softball here handy to show you, but about the size of a softball, right? Is kind of what you want. That's going to give you everything you need and everything you want, from it. And to be honest, it could be even once in a lifetime purchase, because once you figure out and you really bond with a crystal ball and start to get that scrying energetics, flowing through it, you may find you may not want to part with it. I can't remember a single one that I've parted with, and I guess I've got a collection, right? Totally. But before I bring our next guest on, and I've known this guy for I don't know how many years. he actually was a part of me bringing my teachings online. Him and I did a couple of things in his film studio, even some green screen stuff. If you caught my previous podcast and the intro that I actually created, he was the guy who made that happen, and it was kind of cool, kind of neat. Even so much so that here we were many years later, they asked me if I had an intro. It's like, actually I do, and it worked like a charm. I made a new one for this one coming over here, just so I didn't create any copyright dynamics involved, right? I wanted something different than that one. But I really appreciate this guy and respect his walk and what he's up to. And he's one of the freedom fighters. He's one of the champions out there, absolutely, doing what he can, to help us all out. He's a critical thinker in a big way. Before I bring him on, I got to tell you, I think we got the formula for time. I think we got it. This is really big. This is why I started with the Lemurian seed crystal, because it's my belief in teachings that the Lemurians are the ones who brought time. And our relationship with time is our relationship with physics and the particle and gravity. And I believe that these are all these 3D mechanisms that, as we're stepping into this evolutionary version of ourselves, we're going to have a different relationship with, And so the formula for time is F equals 1 over T, F being frequency and T being time. And so it's frequency equals 1 over time. And if I got any mathematicians out there, let's talk. Actually, I think it works out to be something like 0.0767 hertz. I think that would be the speed of time then, wouldn't it? Right? Big, huge stuff. Oh my goodness. And again, I share this with you just as I'm bringing Scott out, because I know he's got a keen mind too. Scott, come out and join us, brother, if you don't mind.
Hi, David. Great to see you again.
Scott, everybody, Scott, everybody. Oh my goodness. It's been way too long, totally. Where are you now? I can't even keep up. You're just always somewhere on the planet. Where are you these days?
I'm in Medellin, Colombia.
Right off the bat, what brings you to Medellin, Colombia?
Well, I wish that was a short story. My dad passed away 10 years ago, and so from leukemia, so it was a slow death, although it was, painless and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And so for 2 years, I spent every weekend going across from Vancouver over to Vancouver Island to make sure they were okay. And my sister was nearby, so I didn't have to be there all the time. And when it was done, I was like, well, how's my mom doing? And for 6 months, I did the same thing. She was fine. And then finally it was, okay, I spent 2 years dedicated to my family. I need to do something for me. What do I want to do? I want to go to Machu Picchu. So I booked a ticket, and it went to Colombia first, then Ecuador, and then Machu Picchu. And I went to 3 cities in Colombia. One was Bogota. It was too cold. Second was Cali. It was too hot. The third was Medellin. It was just right. Haven't seen any bears around here, but the porridge is absolutely spectacular. So it's the city of eternal spring. It's constantly springtime temperature. Like I say, if you imagine the perfect spring day wherever you are, that's what it's like here. And coming from Vancouver, when we see a cloud, it's going to rain for 3 months solid. Totally. Here, these massive big clouds come up the valley, they lightning and rain, and 20 minutes later they're gone and it's sunny again.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the first time I saw this cloud come, I was also stuck here during the pandemic when they closed everything down.
Yeah. So, sounds horrible, man. Yeah.
No, it wasn't horrible at all.
I know.
I ended up finding this loft. Well, it was like an apartment on the roof of an 8th floor building, and it was half terrace, half studio apartment. And I said to the owner, you know what this place needs? And he goes, what? I said, a hammock. And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, if you find it, I'll buy it. So the next week I had a hammock, and I was here for 9 months, sitting on the roof of this building, looking up at the stars, looking up at the moon. And what's interesting, because it's in a valley, either side gets clouds. So there'll be no clouds above us, but the mountains will have this cloud, and there'll be lightning strikes
Mm.
going on like every 2 or 3 minutes. So I would figure out where the lightning was today, because it would be usually in one spot, and I'd sit there and I would just watch it for like hours. And so
Inspiring, huh?
so yeah,
Yeah.
so it became a very special place for me,
Yeah.
because they looked after me during a very difficult time in history, and then I just sort of fell in love with it. So I keep coming back.
Mm. Mm. Now, that I sometimes share about frequencies and vibrations and ley lines, and how each place has its own vibration and frequency. And from the sounds of things, you in this space, have that. You identify that. I mean, that we're all drawn to different places, aren't we? Right? How I ended up being drawn to the space that I'm in. I didn't plan it that way, but spirit, it brings us into those places and those spaces, right?
Yeah.
I'm technically in a place here right now where I've been floundering, as you know, in where's my next landing, right? I came from the woods before I ended up in the city due to injuries and stuff, right? And I'm actually at a place now where me and the missus are really seriously considering, maybe it's time to get back to the woods, or at least a little more space, between
Right.
our neighbors, right?
Right.
Totally. What's it like down there? Yeah, totally.
Well, like I said, it's the city of eternal spring. The city has about 4 million people. It's in the Andes. It's very close to the equator, but it's up about 3,000 feet. So it's very mild temperature wise. It's very different than the Rockies in that, when you go driving out and you're past Hope, you'll see like one house here, and then 10 miles later, another house here. When you get out of the city, all the mountains are full of houses. Now, they're not as close together, but I mean, it's not like every 5 miles. It's like there's 10 you can see right over there and another 10 over there. So they're all farms that are basically on an angle like this.
Okay.
For coffee and whatever else they may be growing. So I am always like, because when you look at a map, I think, okay, there's Medellin. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going, and it's like, yeah, I know I've left the city, and I know it looks like I've left the city, but boy, I haven't left people. There's lots of people around, right? Small pueblos and small villages and that sort of thing. And I spent about a week and a half, about an hour south of Medellin, in Angelopolis, which has about 400 people, and it's right in the middle of the mountains. I'm on the side of the mountain, and it was so peaceful. I mean, you would hear the odd dog bark, you'd hear the odd rooster crow, but you had the birds and the fresh air and the mountains. And I think one of the things that I've noticed when I'm in Medellin is when I'm walking down the street, I'll just be, you're walking and who knows what you're thinking about. And all of a sudden, my heart just opens up. And I have this huge feeling of love and joy and happiness, right? And I say that because it's also very funny, because about a year ago, I was walking along and I'm saying to myself, would I want to live here, like permanently settle down? And there was this massive no, which shocked me, right?
Yeah,
and it was like,
yeah.
Interesting, so I love coming here, and I come here for a month or 2 months, but then I still have to go. And I think part of it is because my journey still is to explore a lot of the planet. There's a lot of places that I really want to go, and I'm not the person to go and take a tour of the place and say I've checked it off, right? Like I'm tend to be 2 or 3 weeks or 6 weeks in one place and really feel like I'm in part of the community.
Well, and to be honest, that from the outside looking in, that's what it looks like you're doing, right? I really actually appreciate that you've got this, definitively a traveler, right? I'm saying you're very comfortable in so many eclectic spaces and dynamics, and most importantly, I do see you on purpose anchoring into the spaces, right? You're not just showing up on the beaches with your margarita in hand, right? You're connecting, you're communing, you're as much as you can as a foreigner, as an outsider, right? Pretty much as much as they let you, you're submerging yourself into that space and sponging, right? And not in a bad way, but absorbing, right? There's maybe a better word, right? For sure. And I noticed that about you, and it's interesting. And without jumping off the deep end completely, the whole world's in a really, really weird place right now, right? So, I mean, what a great time to be alive. I mean, it's like a car wreck. I can't stop looking, right? Totally, right? Um,
I,
I guess the question I'm leaning into is because you do have this experience and you have, I guess it's funny because someone asked me the other day about who you were, right? Because I'd mentioned that but actually it was Luna, because last time she saw you were actually here in Canada, right? And we did that little shooting in the back of your place, right?
right.
Great afternoon. It was awesome. She appreciated meeting you, right? Totally. And she goes, so what does he do? I says, well, I think he's the littlest hobo. Every stop I make a new friend. Like the old TV show.
Right.
And what it was this dog who would travel from place to place, helping people out and making friends. And when his time was up, it was time to move on, right?
That's right. Or half an hour, depending which came first.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or half an hour, exactly. But it was always a feel good, kind of a
very feel
dynamic,
good show,
right?
yeah.
And I appreciate that by witnessing you, right? So, for sure. There's you've got a gentle heart. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you.
Yourself, if you follow this guy on social media, he's talking about stuff that few people were willing to talk about, and I'm saying he's been nothing but Scott. You've been nothing but authentic, and who you are and how you are, and all of that. But there's this gentle nature about you. There is this, this dynamic, and I guess a part of one of the reasons I want to invite you on here is because I don't want to use the word worldly, doesn't make sense, but you're well versed, right? In certainly certain pieces and parts of the world, right? And checking in here from Canada, I guess I'm trying to get a feel for that. I'm trying to get through Scott's eyes and through Scott's experience, what's going on down there? How how does it feel? Because I've been down there a few times as a tourist, but not like what you've experienced. Totally.
Yeah, I think it's getting harder and harder here. For people. Like I've noticed a lot more people on the streets, a lot more people begging, looking for help. And I think not quite as clean or as organized as it used to be. And that's over easily 7 or 8 years of coming, right? Sometimes only for a week, sometimes for a month, sometimes for 9 months.
Yeah.
It feels like it's getting a bit more difficult, a bit harder for the people. There's a lot more struggle going on. And one of the things that you said reminded me of, I love comic books, grew up reading sci-fi and comic books and fantasy and Tolkien and all that sort of stuff. And there was one character that wasn't particularly my favorite, but the Silver Surfer. And there was this story where his love of his life was stuck on their planet or whatever, which was devastated. But everywhere that she walked, plants would start growing behind her, right? So there's this image of this beautiful woman walking and these plants growing behind wherever she walked. And then you've got ley lines and stuff like that. So in my mind, everywhere I have ever gone, it's been to go on a healing journey. I just feel like when I go and I walk and I go to these places, it's a healing journey. And many of the places that I go because I have set an intention of heading south, right? Not to the place. And right, it's just, I wanted to go to South America and Central America, and wherever I ended up was in God's hands, not in my hands. And one of the ways that I travel, and I love traveling this way because it's being of service in addition to just finding out about stuff, was I house sit. So some people will say, okay, I have this house, I have 2 dogs, I want to go back to the States for a month or whatever. And so they use a site called Trusted House Sitters, and I'm on there and they'll post and then I'll apply and I'll talk to them. And sometimes I go, sometimes I don't. So I don't really, although it's a mutual agreement that I go somewhere, I don't make the choice of where it is, right? Like they put up their hand at the right time for me to apply. They like me and they accept me, and then I go. And as a result, I go to many places that I would never even have thought of going. Like I thought Panama, the country, was terrible, but my only experience is Panama City, which is hot, humid, and full of people.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's like, I don't want to go here. But Coronado, an hour and a half out of town, is a beautiful beach town. And then there's little beach towns all along. I've been to 3 or 4 of those. And then there's highlands in Boquete near Costa Rica and Volcan. I've stayed there for months at a time. And it's like, wow, like once you get out of Panama City and away from the canal, this is an amazing country. So, but I would never have done that. Like if I was looking at a map and I was traveling, I would never have thought, even considered going to any of these places. But because they had dogs and cats that needed looking after, I looked after them.
Totally.
And I ended up going there. So I kind of say, I set the direction. I want to go to South America, or I want to go to Africa or Europe or Asia or whatever. And then God and the good people at Trusted House Sitters decide where I end up going. And I always look at it as a healing journey.
Totally. And you're playing into synchronicity, you're playing into symbiosis, I'm saying I truly respect, kind of what you're up to there. So many of my life choices are made that way, right? I know what I'm looking for and I'm projecting into it, but it's like I jump into the river, not quite knowing where the river goes, right? And that's a part of the fun. That's a part of the experience. And I swear that river's going to take me places I didn't even know about, right? I didn't know that I wanted to know about, right? And that there's really something really powerful about that. Last time I was in Panama City, interesting. I took a group of people down, and we were creating this bridging with the Ambara tribe, which are deep in the Panama jungles, right? But of course we had to land in and go through, Panama City first, right? And so we rented a bus of our own with a driver and, a guide and what have you. And, boy, there had to be close to about 30 of us, right?
Wow.
And, and so we all piled in this bus and we're going through Panama City, which in of itself is an experience, right? For sure. I'm glad we hired a driver. I couldn't have pulled it off, right? Totally. And we at one point had to stop because a man right in front of us had been clipped and killed. Like he had been killed. The problem is that he wasn't quite dead when he was there on the streets. We had 3 nurses with us who were at the front door, almost out the front door of the bus to do what they do. And that bus driver slammed that door shut. He says, do not. He says, He says, if you show up, they'll hold you responsible. Right? Totally. And because, well, one gringo, etc. Right? All of that, right?
Right.
Going and he's like, no, don't you dare. And literally he drove around. He got the heck out of there. Honest to goodness. And, there was almost a mutiny on his hands. These nurses are like, are you kidding me? Our life is at stake here, right? For sure. And, obviously that brought to us this teaching, and the guide and, the driver, at the end of the day, we still didn't like it, but we had to accept that, life comes cheap sometimes in some of these places, right? For sure. And that circumstances and situations are not the same everywhere you go in the world, right?
Right.
And
we don't always know the consequences of our actions. And when we're in a foreign environment and somebody does know, you have to respect your guide where you are, right? Because otherwise, who knows what'll happen.
And we had to, trust me, actually, that was really came apparent at one point, because on that same journey, of course, by the time we were done, the city was way behind us. We're out in the countrysides, really enjoying, and all the the farming and that. I mean, it was just a beautiful country. And then sort of getting to more jungle and more, deeper woods. And we had to stop a few times and bribe the appropriate people, right? Just to be able to, the toll or the tariff, call what you want, right? And no paperwork got exchanged, but money sure did, right? And off we go. And then at some point, the Ambara tribe met us with hand-carved canoes, and we did the rest of the journey in the canoes.
Oh, wow.
And we spent some time trading, and it was interesting. We brought a lot of stuff, gifts, with us, from the first world country and etc.
The Great White North.
Yeah, totally. And I got to tell you, the thing that was the biggest hit. Are you ready for this? Balloons. The whole tribe got off on balloons like you wouldn't believe. Just it was something to be honest. They actually told us they'd never seen them before, and the way they acted, I believed them. Right? Seriously, right?
Yep.
And but yeah, but they didn't quite know what to do with it. So blew one up, tied it off, and here, oh my goodness! All of a sudden, the party's on, right? Seriously, right? And so to me, the message.
This might be a bit gross, but I've got this thing. What about? Oh, maybe I pee into it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I don't think they've seen a condom either. Just saying. Yeah, exactly. Totally, right. And so yeah, what do you do with it, right? Kind of an idea. And so, it did remind me about. I guess if anything, there's a part of me regrets not having my kids along with me on that ride. Does that make sense? Because seeing people live in such a simple way with so much joy, so much happiness, so much, they're actually showing up and engaging. They have a relationship with their life. They have a relationship with their food, the weather, what I'm saying, every part of their being. Yes, and people and in relationship, right? So, for sure. There was a time though, and back to the you kind of pay attention to your surroundings and trust where where you can. There was a couple times when bribes were being passed back and forth, and I'm looking around the bus going, "Ooh, was this actually a good idea?" Right? What I'm saying? The whole bus load full of us, right? For sure. And just the good news is Spirit was with us and yada yada, and in and out. And here I can tell the story, right? Kind of an idea. The biggest danger we encountered were the crocodiles in the water. Lots of them. What I'm saying? And spiders. Oh my God! I saw the largest spider in the world in one of the bathrooms down there. And I don't know if I'd call that a bathroom. Just saying, bathrooms around the world. There's a
you can say baño.
Baño, yeah, totally, yeah. Baños around the world. That will be a book. Oh my goodness, totally.
I want to back up for just a second, if I may, because you were showing the eye and all that stuff, and I thought I wanted to show everybody what I carry with me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Organite.
Yep. And guess who made it?
I know exactly where that came from. Totally. Awesome. Okay. Now let's talk about Organite as a teaching here for everybody. Okay. Now, Organite itself, and just give me a second here to kind of fill in some blanks here. Organite, if you were to read EMF chart, peaks and valleys and stuff like that, okay, what it does and the benefits to us as humans and other living dynamics in this strong EMF world and getting stronger, 5G, etc., right?
Right.
What it does is it knocks the sharp edges off of the peaks and valleys so that the energy can still exist. It's not going to interfere with, say, self-service or your internet, or whereas some of these blockers do kind of they interfere and maybe even choke off a little bit of the Wi-Fi to reduce the emanations. I can appreciate that's the technology it does. Whereas Organite doesn't interfere with, but what it does is it allows and enables those frequencies, those vibrations, those wavelengths to pass through the body harmlessly, right? This is really, really big. Now, what's really important about Organite is, and I know it was all the fad for the longest time that everyone's following, the Reich, teachings online, and because it was actually William Reich who kind of stepped into and worked with orgone technology and which led to Organite. And this is a rabbit hole I'd love for every one of our listeners to go down. This is a really cool tech, actually, and it's been around forever, maybe even as far back as Tartarian tech, but it's really important because there's a whole bunch of folks out there who don't realize that online, they're not publishing a really important step in the process. And what that is we actually take the metal shavings that go into that puck that Scott just showed, and the reason it's in a puck form is because we use some really high tech technology called cupcake pans. And so we literally, because cupcake pans can sustain the final step that's in this Organite scenario. So we would take there's little pieces of steel, aluminum, copper, there's some quartz in there as well, but we have some of this magnetized metal, soft metals and hard metals alike, and they're put together in a specific recipe, and then they're actually heated until they're past 2,000 degrees. Once something is heated past 2,000 degrees, the magnetic field nullifies it. It goes away. And so then we were able to work with it as almost like a liquid. And we would pour it into these metal cupcake pans because it's the only thing that can sustain that kind of temperature, right? At the same time as, asbestos gloves and yada, 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 right? And so we'd literally pour them into cupcake trays and, put them up on a rack, literally like a baker's like a bakery. You
Wow.
know what I'm saying? And it's all, and then of course we cool them all simultaneously, right? So what happens, and we had to use kind of like a version of a helicopter resin, because we also had to find a resin that was going to be able to keep up with those temperatures, also including the different temperatures that anybody who has a puck is going to be exposed to, right? For sure. And all the other variations. And we needed it to be able to contain, because once this magnetic field reduced down below 2000 degrees, those magnet pieces wanted to go bam. You know what I'm saying? They wanted to scatter away from each other, because that's what happens, right? For sure.
Right.
They actually let a few do that, and that's where they got the measurement that one orgonite puck looks after approximately 1,400 square feet. From where it is in your hand, you're actually looking after quite a radius around you.
And up and down.
Yeah, up and down. The walls don't seem to have that any influence or significance in that matter. It's this field that's exactly is playing on this almost a 5D dynamic itself, right? Kind of a building blocks of life. And you're still made up, Batacawias, and you're made up of everything that the universe is made up of, right? And so that's the dynamics it's playing on. And so this bang happens. And so what it does is you put it in your house. Most of my clients, to be honest, I suggest throw it in a water heater, because I know also it's going to play with the amplification of water as well in that scenario, right? And so, and that's usually where all the danger is for EMF and, fuse boxes. And, so often it's in that same area of the world. But without that heating and the 2000 degrees and then having it cool, it's technically not orgonite. Now, and again, I mean, no disrespect, because there's a lot of people out there creating some masterpieces, pyramids and different shapes, sacred geometry, and the layers of, specifically placed sacred geometry and symbols and sigils and quartz and shapes. And there's some masterpieces going on out there, but they're not orgonite.
They look like if you put them in the oven, they would melt.
Exactly. And they might actually be made of a resin that might not. Does it make sense, right?
Right.
So,
I don't know that that's true, but they sure don't look like they're going to survive 2000 degrees.
Correct. Now, this puck that you have, I actually know a lot of people who have taken their puck and actually shaved it off into pieces, and they made jewelry out of it, right? Just made like Scrabble size pieces and stuff like that as well, right? I appreciate that you're carrying that around with you. That is so cool. And the value of you carrying it around with you is there too, because I actually understand obviously the science of it too, right? What I'll also share with you is one final thing is there was some experimenting done where they realized if you drop it in water, that field extends to almost quarter mile. Remember that 1,400 square feet? That field expands to almost quarter mile, but you have to actually submerge it. Yeah. So in my own home, no, I don't know. I usually have the puck right here in my office, but I don't. I just have a mason jar, and I put Ormus water into it, of course, right? So I put Ormus water into it and a puck, and I just seal up the mason jar, and the thing's looking after me, right? So honest to goodness. And
so when I travel, I'll have a bowl I can put water in. Can I put it in that?
Absolutely. Totally. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't drink the water. Unfortunately, we tried our best to find something that you could put into a water dish and it wouldn't contaminate. But because of the resins that are in the glue, right, afterwards you're likely going to have, it won't kill you, but, probably wouldn't be great.
Well, I wouldn't plan on drinking the water, but if it's going to make it a quarter mile in every direction.
Exactly.
That's really going to help all the people that are within a quarter mile radius of me, which is probably 100,000.
Totally. Just by being there, right? You know what I'm saying? Like that's really, really, really big.
Like I said, my journey is healing.
Yeah.
Totally. I just didn't know that I could have a bigger impact than I'm having. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're so welcome, Scott. Oh my goodness. You inspire me to teach, totally. Now along those lines, you and I do have some things that we posted a billion years ago. To be honest, I can't off the top of my head even remember the name of the company.
Udemy. We posted a course on Udemy.
That's right. We posted. I was on Udemy, and you know what? Every so often they send me like $2 or $3 because, of course, it's like almost free, right? You know what I'm saying? We're literally, it was planting the seed for me taking these teachings online. Previous, I hadn't in any way, shape, or form even thought of it, and Scott and I got together, and he has these skills and this desire to share and teach, and I have this, blabbermouth and, kind of a few things to say. And so it just worked out so cool. And
It,
we did
it
create
was
work
it was
together.
very fun for me too, because we actually went out onto the river
Mm,
behind my place, and there was a couple little islands. I mean, like lots of rocks and pebbles, and that sort. What you'd expect in a river. And we just picked these different places and did the recording. So it was fun because, generally speaking, what you see right now is how I do my recordings, right?
got it.
I'm on one side halfway around the world, you're on the other end halfway around the world, and this is as close as it gets. So to be actually like physically and touchy feely sort of thing, it was, and then to have nature and do it in nature was really
Totally.
cool.
No, I do remember that day, of course. Every so often, I even stub my toe on it online, right? It does show up, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's funny. You come across my own, even myself. I come across my own stuff sometimes. I go, "Oh, I remember that. Holy cow!"
right,
Right?
right.
Totally. And but it was
Mm.
kind of cool. I also remember I actually did a full ceremony, a pipe ceremony down at the waters there. I felt strongly compelled to do so, and
Yes, that's right.
and I remember how respectful you were of making sure that you didn't capture any moments that maybe were not necessarily appropriate, right? And in your posting, you had a lot of reverence and a lot of, and so
Thank
there's,
you.
yeah, and so there's just a balance sometimes between it, right? I can appreciate the eagerness of wanting to share all of this stuff with people in the world at large. Boy, I'm the first to line up on that line, right? Honest to goodness. But on the other hand, there's this, things are only kept secret until they're recognized as being sacred, right? And that's kind of how most of the teachings in my world, the White Star teachings included, I have access to, and we're talking decades of cultural teachings that I could be just blah blah blah, that I could be just sharing here. But to be honest, that's meant to be shared with an appropriate person and with an
Right,
appropriate way, is because they've showed up. And I share this because I'm putting myself in the place of the people that you meet, right? Here's this guy who comes in, yeah, you know what I'm saying, and how much do you share, and how do you know what I'm saying?
I had that experience. And I don't know now how many, it was 15 years ago, maybe. Uh, a lady that I had done a lot of personal development work with called me up, and she and her boyfriend, I knew her and her boyfriend quite well, and he was Native. And she says, he wants me to go to a sweat.
Mm, mm.
And she says, I want you to come with me. First, because you're white. Secondly, because I feel safe around you. So for about a year and a half, almost every Monday afternoon, I went to North Vancouver and did a sweat.
Oh, good on you. Oh,
And
right,
yeah, it
that's
was
cool.
amazing. Like, I learned the whole, the
Yeah.
process. I could see the whole process, be a part of it. And she said to me one day, we've really changed how these people around us feel about white people,
Mhm.
because we're in there, we're working hard with them, and we're changing their. And I said, oh, well, that's great. Sometimes I'm totally oblivious, and sometimes I'm very insightful. And
Totally.
this was a totally oblivious time. And then after about a year and a quarter, because it wasn't at the end, she called me up, and her boyfriend's son, who was 22, had committed suicide in Calgary.
Ouch. Yeah.
And she says, we really want you to come to a sweat in, I don't want to say in his honor, but because of him, right,
Yeah.
to heal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, sure. Now, I'd gone to all these sweats, and they were tough, but I could get through them, right? And so I figured after a year and a half, I kind of had an idea what the sweat lodge was all about.
Sure. Yeah.
Little did I know, I had no idea. So this was like a very select group of people and no shit. And when I got home and I took my shirt off, there were red lines where my sweat had scalded my skin.
Yeah.
Like, this was a no BS
Yeah.
sweat.
Yeah.
We were serious and did the work.
Yeah.
And I'll always, remember that was a special time.
Totally. I hear that completely. And for those listening, it's typically not a macho contest. It's not about machismo. It's not about
Right.
I can sustain and receive. there is the potential of getting yourself to that place of raw, in that space beyond the shadow of a doubt, but it's raw on every level. As
Yeah.
a pourer myself, I'm looking to, I'm energetically paying attention to every person in that space on purpose. I'm paying attention in deeper ways than even just listening, right? Energetically, I'm feeling, I'm connected with each person. And I'm waiting, and I'm going to continue to pour and work those medicines and the songs as they come until every person in that round has this physiological response to the medicine of that round. And sometimes it absolutely, you have to get pedal to the metal and let's just see what this baby can do, right? I've never scalded anybody myself, but it's come
Right.
close a few times, right? For
Yeah.
sure. But I've also been in them where it was so gentle, right? I'm saying, and people
Right.
barely broke a sweat, but yet all the work was being done, right? For sure. And there's been so many rounds, even myself, where there's no water poured. You're just sitting in silence, and just the heat off the rocks. You're hearing them tick and sing at us in a certain way, right? And so it's never the same lodge twice. And I appreciate, that's kind of what you're sharing too.
Right.
Is even myself, after, boy, I've been pouring since, oh my goodness, I started firekeeping training late 80s, early 90s, and so that's been a few years, for sure.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And somewhere along there, someone handed me a ladle, many years down the road. And the Stone People's Purification Lodge is actually the technical name. Sweat is, of course, is a slang, right? For sure. The Sweat Lodge, right? Because that's kind of what you do there, but the name itself is Stone People's Purification Lodge.
No, I never heard that before.
Yeah, it's actually a teaching, believe it or not, a lot of lodge keepers don't even know.
Yeah,
It's
well,
all
mine
about,
didn't.
yeah, it's all about those rocks, right? It's all about the stones themselves and what they bring into us and they share with us, and
Grandfathers.
grandfathers, grandmothers, depending on the PC circle that you're sitting in, right? And the whole idea is the whole ceremony is around the life they bring, the conception of the new life, that dynamic. It's a life death story. A purification lodge. It's about leaving behind and starting fresh, and it's rebirthing.
Right.
And, you got the hut itself is the womb, and of course the fire is the masculine, and somewhere between that yin yang dance, there's magic that happens, right? For sure, it's very powerful. Now down in the south there, they have the versions, but they call them Temazcal, right? And it's interesting. You even mentioned Machu Picchu. Just there it is again, right? Late last year, following my pipe around, basically committing the soul getaway journey, and what that means is I follow this bundle, this pipe that I carry, this sacred icon, if you like, and it leads me to these different places around the planet, and that's what different from what Scott is sharing. Yeah, only in my case, I'm led specifically to specific ley lines.
Yeah.
Where the ley lines come together, they create this powerful juxtaposition, this portal, doorway, gateway, call it what you want, right? So,
Yeah.
and my job is, if one of them's broken, it's like I can hear it from around the world, and I got to go sing a certain song so it can be fixed again and work properly, right? So,
Oh, beautiful.
yeah, and that's kind of the nature of that. And I've been doing that for about 15, 20 years now, right, in different locations. And when we hit Hawaii, I got to tell you, this last time, the magic every day, the dominoes. As soon as I landed on the tarmac, actually in Big Island, Hawaii there, and we're heading to the west side, Kahina Beach, and doing some work out in that way, I get a phone call, and I don't even actually normally answer my phone. It's one of those things of, you leave me a message, I'll get back to you, baby.
Right. Right.
An idea, right? I'm horrible for that, but that's why I have a phone. I was never one of those guys who jumped up from the dinner table to run and ransom the phone either. You know what I'm saying? It was, that was never me. It's like, no, I'm busy doing me, right? Totally, right? Just because someone picked up a phone doesn't mean they automatically own my time, right? Totally,
Exactly.
and I mean, in this case, I picked it up, and I'm on the plane even still, and it's one of the elders from Peru. And this is one of the prophecy keepers, actually, who lives in, beneath the actual, sacred site, Machu Picchu itself. What's interesting is I received the teachings many years back that apparently there was a guy, how Machu Picchu got started was there was a guy who followed those ley line teachings I was just talking about, but
Mm.
not only just ley line teachings, but astrological teachings and all the whole gamut. And he found the specific place, specific location, specific time that he was supposed to come together and do this power eruption scenario. He was looking for enlightenment, basically. He was looking to become, godlike, And so
Oh,
it led him to that mountaintop. And apparently there was 3 peaks surrounding him, 3 sisters surrounding him. And when he did his magic, apparently there was a big kaboom, an earth-shattering kaboom, right? and
wow.
and when the villagers and the rest dared to climb the mountain, after the dust had settled, to see, what was left, if and take note of, well, apparently when they arrived at the top, there was this energy that, when people who stepped into it had any form of ailments, were suddenly and almost instantly healed.
Oh, nice.
And so this residual energy hung around there forever, so much so that constant pilgrimages were made, by people who are ailing, and all of that. And eventually there was just so many people coming there, someone one day set up a hot dog stand, and the rest is history. And apparently that's kind of the gist of it, right? So, for sure.
Right.
But there has been
The
some
hot dog stand is still there. I can attest to that. I'm
hot
not
dog.
sure if they have hot dogs or not, but I saw the stand.
Got it. Good. Okay. And now, of course, there were teachings of Star Nation, ancient alien ancestors, having a hand in the creation of some of the temple structures that were there, right? I believe, and wrap your head around this. Actually, maybe we'll talk about this one of these shows, but I believe a big chunk of these pyramids were actually created through a form of 3D technology. And I got it through a vision I had in Teotihuacan, working with the Coco Calitzo University that still exists there. Just working with elders and some of the shamans and the chiefs and all that stuff in that space, I had this vision work where literally, if you want to use the word spaceship, what I'm saying, it would hover above the space that they're going to create this, which is specifically in alignment with ley line, technology as well. And they would literally use the materials that were there, what I'm saying, and rearrange them, no different than a 3D printer might do. And you're, pouring different materials in the top, and out the bottom comes what you wanted. And in that second,
That's a cool idea.
My brain went, not only is that a cool idea, but it actually makes sense, right? So, totally. And so that's my theory, and I'm sticking with it. And I wasn't smart enough to invent it. It was something I saw, right? So,
Right.
for sure. And
Cool.
so, yeah, totally. And so Machu Picchu has this historic consequence of being a powerful dynamic, a place where a person could ultimately achieve 5D. Because I think that's what that guy was up to in the first place. Does it make sense, right? So,
Yeah.
So there's something important going on there. And then later to have Star Nation show up, because apparently he made the flat spot, and it was Star Nation who showed up and actually introduced some of the technology to create some of the buildings and the structures that were there. Not all of them, some of them are man-made. But apparently I haven't been there yet. But it's interesting, but I've been to Peru. Matter of fact, this elder, the first thing he said to me is, "So when are you coming back?" And I'm like, "Hello, who is this?" Totally, right? And obviously, it's da-da-da-da, and I don't want to give his name, but
Right.
and I'm like, oh, good to hear from you. He says, "When are you coming back?" He says, "We need you. We need your pipe. We need your
Right.
team. This is what you offer." And I knew 2024 was going to be a gong show. My crystal ball made it very clear to me, honest to goodness. And so I wasn't sure about some of the traveling dynamics. I'm still not. For sure. It's, I honor the fact that, there you are out and about in the world, and sometimes I'm wondering myself if I'm going to be trapped here in Canada forever, right? Totally.
It was a concern of mine, that they were, what happens if this is like permanent sort of thing? That was one of the fears that I had. And then I stopped and I said, in the entire history that we know of in mankind, and we know hundreds of thousands of years before that, men and women have moved around the planet, right? So
yeah,
not going to stop just because a bunch of people say stop,
Yeah.
And so that ended my biggest concern. Like there may be pauses, certainly. Like one of the reasons why I left home 7 years ago in last January, and one of the things that really drove me to start traveling was I was afraid there was going to be a major war with Iran and Taiwan, one or both, and that if there's a world war, unlike previous world wars, like everything's going to shut down, like you're not going to be going anywhere. And so I thought I better get this out of the way before I can't. And now, of course, we've got things going on in the Middle East and Russia and Ukraine, and
Totally.
And it's still the same old story over with Taiwan. So it just continues to fuel my desire, because there are places that I feel really drawn to, and a strong desire to see and go. And the other part of it is my mom's 91, so I have to come back to Canada for Christmas, and that's my thing, is I come back every Christmas and spend a couple months seeing her and being with her, and which cuts into the traveling, which means I'm more desperate to do my, to go to this place or that. And I used to say when I was in my 20s, if I had a tough decision, I would go, okay, if I'm 60 years old and I'm on a rocking chair on the porch, would I regret doing this or not doing this? And of course, now it's like when I'm 90 and I'm on a rocking chair on a porch, will I regret doing this or not doing this? Because 60's long gone. But
I'm validating. I caught myself the other day going, 57 is not that old. That guy next to me says, yeah, remember when you were 18? 30 was old, right? Totally, right? So we keep validating. But I actually dare say, like, yourself and myself, and I'll own some of this too, we're pretty robust for 60 compared to the 60 that I witnessed when I was
my grandparents, they just sat around, and when they did move, it was kind of like this. So
totally.
And I think with them, they all worked on farms. They all were, did a lot of hard labor. There weren't the tractors and stuff that my uncles were using. So they had a hard life. And then it was kind of like, we're done. We're just going to sit and relax for the first time in our life, because for their whole life, if they didn't get the carrots and the potatoes in and the chickens in the roost, there was no food. There was nobody coming to give us food. So, we got to make sure we have that done. Totally. And so I think it's just a totally different generation. Like the generations are just so different when you think back to, like, they barely had a telephone. Totally. They had no TV. They all, my parents' generation all grew up with no electricity, as far as I can tell, so, and just, it's amazing when you think the technological revolution we've been in.
Oh, totally. Like, even myself, I'm I'm early Gen X, I guess, 67, right? Even in my lifetime, the things that I've personally witnessed, never mind what my grandmother has seen, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing in such a short amount of time, right? And I know we've had help along the way, of course, with technology and what have you. I don't know if humans are smarter or not these days. I don't know, right? So, some of them old cowboys were pretty savvy, man. Seriously.
I would say definitely not smarter.
Yeah.
And it's because it's like anything else. Like if you pick up a rock every day, and you move it around, you're going to be really strong. But if you've got a machine that does it, you're not. Like I used to be very, very good. I'm still good at math, but I used to be able to, 342 times 721 is blah, blah, and I'd figure it out kind of almost in my head. And now it's like, I don't even bother trying. I just get out the calculator and hit it in because it's faster and whatever. And I was with a friend of mine the other day, and he's like this math genius, and he says, tell me a couple numbers, I'll multiply them together. And it's like, oh wow, that's really cool. Totally. So, but I never, I let that muscle atrophy, and I think we've all let so many of those sort of things just, sit in front of the TV for 8 hours a day and watch what happens to your brain, right?
No doubt,
because you're not using it. And
no, I don't. I know exactly what you're talking about. To be honest, with my concussions that I got, through the accidents, it was that was probably one of the biggest hits. My physical body, oh man, I got scars everywhere. Don't worry about that. But when the mind, what I'm saying, wasn't keen, wasn't as strong, wasn't as, like I was Arnold Schwarzenegger, in here, right? To concussion. and all that went with it, right? For sure. And that was probably the biggest thing for me. Like, it was so devastating. It was devastating, to
Right.
not, I mean, I'm feeling stronger now. I've really on purpose worked the mental muscles. And I mean, I'm in the industry. I know how. That's why I applied everything in my tickle
Right.
trunk, to get me caught up. And I'm feeling pretty strong these days. But boy, I know exactly what you're talking
You
about.
have to work at it, right?
Yeah.
So you just can't sit back and relax and expect Netflix to fix you.
Totally. Totally. Actually, you know what? One of the fun ways I actually got back was I started with like Luminosity, these video games that you can play, not just memory games, but, pattern recognition and and to believe it or not, I found that had actually quite an impact, like a favorable impact, for sure. Right.
Cool.
Yeah.
I've been exercising my brain with chess, and I don't know how. I would just say, God placed it in front of me, but there's these videos. Well, first of all, there's a friend of mine on Facebook, and he'll post a puzzle. White to checkmate black in 2 moves, figure it out. So then I'll sit there and I'll figure it out. And then I don't know if Facebook tells YouTube or whatever, but all of a sudden I have these little puzzles on YouTube, and it's a video. And the guy says, okay, here's this, this, and this. And in 3 moves, you can checkmate. How does that happen? Right. And he says, pause it and figure it out. So then I pause it and I try to figure it out. And then I'm a bit lazy and I say, I don't know how, or I figure it out. And then he plays it and he says, well, here are all the options and none of these work, but this one does. And I go, oh, and it makes me think outside the box, right? Because it's like, you have to give up your queen, or sacrifice your queen, or you have to do this, or you have to do that, which doesn't make intuitive sense when you're looking at the puzzle, right? Because you got to do something over here, but the king is over here. So why do you go over there, right? Exactly. And I'm really quite enjoying it. And I'm noticing that when you start using that muscle we call the brain, it gets stronger.
Well, next time you're in Canada, that's it. We have to meet over a board. We have to. Like, yeah, totally, man. I'm again, chess, backgammon. Yeah, I'm saying this.
Yeah, backgammon is another great game.
Yeah, totally.
I played this buddy of mine backgammon, and I played the perfect game.
I love it.
If you watched it, you would have said, "Man, oh man, like you couldn't have done anything better." Yeah. And I lost.
Oh, what? Oh, man.
And my friend, he says, "Yeah, like Scott, I've never seen anything like this. You just built it up. It was perfect." But I had to hit a 6 and a 3, and I did, and I was out of trouble. And then I had to hit a 2 and a 1, and I did, and I was out of trouble. And so it's fun because you can do everything right and still lose, right? And I think that's a big lesson.
How does this work into life? Sometimes you can do everything right and you still don't win. Honest to goodness.
But that doesn't mean you quit the game, right? You come back, you dust yourself off, play the next one. When I was learning backgammon in grade 9, this girl taught me, and she would say, "Man, the first half of the game, you were amazing." And the last half, it was like she said, "Okay, now I'm going to have to start to play." And then she would whoop me, right?
Yeah.
Like she says, "I was so far behind and everything else." But she won the game, right? So it's just funny how that's the aspect of chance and what would be another word for chance? The things that are outside of your control that happen in your life, right? And so you can be doing everything right, and then it doesn't work out the way you want, but you get up and you just continue on, because if you are doing everything the best that you can do, what more is there?
Exactly. And on that note, we've hit top of the hour. Not enough time ever, Scott.
Thank you, David.
I know you've got a very select clientele, and if someone actually manages to get in to see you and have you apply your wonderful magic to their world, to be awesome, how can they reach you?
The best thing, and I should have said this at the beginning before we came on the air, is Facebook. And the reason I say that is if you look at my Facebook profile and you still want to talk to me,
yeah,
good.
No doubt. There's something about that. Yeah.
I tell you, I get all these friend requests and I'm thinking, like, why are these people trying to be my friend? Have they not looked at my profile?
Oh, yeah, but you and I both know. I mean, and you know what? Just to forewarn you all, absolutely, he's on the hot topics. He's pushing those buttons that people don't want to talk about, and I had nothing but respect, for that.
I,
You know,
can I make one comment on that?
please, yeah, please.
I only do it for one reason. I have 3 grandsons and 1 grand nephew. And I am absolutely terrified in 10 years, they'll say, Grandpa, why didn't you do something or say something? And I'll say, it's all on my profile. Everybody had access to it. And, a lot of people ignored it and they suffer the consequences, and it's sad.
I think we could all be motivated by wanting to be that kind of man that our children are proud of. I think that's huge, man.
Thank you.
I don't think we can end it any differently than that. I love you guys like crazy. Love you, Scott.
Love you too, David.
I'll see you over at Chessboard soon, brother.
You betcha.
I'll see everybody else next week.